Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum dear student. This is Rubian for assessment class 01. We are having subject chemistry and chapter number 2, and today we are going to revise ions. This is your teacher Kainat. So let's talk about the learning objectives. Today we are going to cover basically ions. So by the end of the lesson you will be able to identify the ions and differentiate between positive ions and negative ions. So let's talk about ions. Basically, ion is a species, either it is carrying a positive charge or a negative charge. We know that we are having a neutral atom, so on a neutral atom there will be no charge, but on that neutral atom, if there is a charge either in the form of positive or negative, then we can say that it's an ion. Ions are formed by the addition or the removal of electron, like either the atom loses the electron or either the atom gains the electron. By this thing, the ratio of the electron and the proton couldn't be same. When the ratio of proton and electron will disturb, then ions are formed. So there are two types of ions. One is the positive ions and second one is the negative ions. There is another name of positive ion and negative ion. The positive ions are called cations and the negative ions are called anions, just like cat having paws. So it's a trick that cations. Cations means cat having paws, cat and paws. Cat is for cation and paws is for positive ion. So cations are positive ions and anions are negative ions. Then we have positive ions. Positive ions are formed by the positive ions. Positive ions are formed by the removal of electron. When an atom loses an electron, a positive ion is formed because an atom is neutral. It is having equal number of protons and equal number of electrons. But when an atom loses an electron, the ratio of the electron and the proton will disturb. When the ratio of electron and proton disturb, then electron loss means there are lesser electrons and more protons. So that's why atom carries positive charge. For example, we are having an atom A. Suppose atom A is going to lose electron and it will be converted into a positive ion. Like we are having sodium atom. When sodium atom loses one electron, it will have sodium positive 1 charge. What about magnesium? When magnesium atom loses 2 electrons, it will get Mg plus 2 ion. And what about aluminium? Aluminium, when it loses 3 electrons, it will have Al plus 3 ion, means plus 3 charge. So positive 1, positive 2 and positive 3. These charges are based on the number of electrons lost by the atom. The number of electrons lost by the atom, exactly the same charge will exhibit by that atom. Now let's talk about positive ions or cations properties. Cations means simple. Positive ions are also called cations. They have positive charge. They are formed by the removal of electrons and they may carry positive 1, positive 2 or positive 3 charge on the basis of the number of electrons lost by them. For example, suppose we have sodium atom. When sodium atom loses 1 electron, like here you can see the structure of sodium. This sodium atom atomic number is 11. It means it is having 2 electrons in its first shell, 8 electrons in its second shell and 1 electron in its third shell. First shell is the K shell, second shell is the L shell and third shell is the M shell. It is having 1 electron in its third shell. So every atom in the periodic table wants to get stability. So for that purpose, either the atom exhibit 8 electrons in the valence shell or 2 electrons in the valence shell. So for sodium atom, it is very difficult to gain 7 electrons. But it is very easy to lose 1 electron. So when this sodium atom loses its 1 electron, that is in the valence shell. Valence shell is the outermost shell, the last shell. So when it loses its one electron from its outermost shell or the valence shell, it will get positive charge because the electrons will be less and the protons will be more. In case of sodium, there are 11 protons and 11 electrons, but after the loss of one electron, the sodium will have 11 protons and 10 electrons. So that's why it will get a positive charge, and the name of the ion is sodium cation. So this is how cations are formed. Now let's talk about negative ions. Negative ions are formed by the addition of electron. It is totally opposite to positive ions. Positive ions are formed by the removal of electrons, but negative ions are formed by the addition of electrons. Like suppose we are having an element A. When it gains one electron, it will get a negative charge. So let's talk about chlorine. Chlorine is an atom, but when chlorine atom gains one electron, it will get chloride negative ion, or it will get -1 charge, and the name of the ion is chloride ion. What about oxygen? Oxygen will gain 2 electrons and it will get -2 charge, and the ion is oxide ion. What about nitrogen? Nitrogen will gain 3 electrons and it will get -3 charge, and the name of the ion is nitrite ion. So this is how negative ions are formed. The number of electrons gained by the atom, it will get the same charge. If it gains 1 electron, it will exhibit -1 charge. If it will gain 2 electrons, it will exhibit -2 charge, and if it gains 3 electrons, it will exhibit -3 charge. Now, there are some of the properties of negative ions, like they are also known as anions. They are called anions. They have negative charge. They are formed by the addition of electron, and they may carry -1, -2 or -3 charge depending upon the number of electrons lost by them. Now, let's take an example of chlorine. Chlorine is an atom. It's having electronic configuration 2, 8 and 7, means 2 electrons in its first shell, 8 electrons in its second shell, and 7 electrons in its third shell. Like if you're talking about its proton number, so proton number is 17, electron number is also 17, because in our previous lesson we have learned that the proton number and the electron number would be same for any atom, any neutral atom. So when we were talking about a neutral atom, the number of protons and the number of electrons are same. So that's why a neutral atom is having no charge, 0 charge. That's why we can say that an atom is neutral. What about neutrons? There are 18 neutrons inside the nucleus of chlorine. And how it will get 18 neutrons? Because we have learned in previous lesson that by subtracting atomic number from the mass number, we will get number of neutrons. So same like that. So we are talking about proton and electron. Keep in mind, during the ion formation, there will be no role of proton and neutron. Only electrons are participating. Either the removal of electron is there or the gain of electron is there. So that's why here chlorine atom is having 7 electrons in its valence shell. It needs 1 more electron to complete its octet or to get stability. So that's why this chlorine atom will gain 1 more electron. As you can see here, after the gaining of electron, 1 electron is represented by pink color circle. So this means that 1 electron is gained by chlorine atom, and now its electronic configuration is 2, 8 and 8, means 2 in the first shell, 8 in the second shell and 8 in the third shell. So here we have 17 protons, 18 neutrons and 18 electrons. Now the protons are 17 and the electrons are 18. So that's why electron number is greater than the proton number. The electron exhibit negative charge, protons exhibit positive charge. Negative charge is dominated. So that's why chlorine atom will get negative charge, and it will now become an ion that is called chloride ion, that is anion, negatively charged ion. So this is how negative ions are formed and positive ions are formed. There is no role of proton and neutron in the formation of negative ions or positive ions. There is only electron that is either gained by the atom or lost by the atom. When it is gained by the atom, negative ions are formed, they are called anions, and when it is lost by the atom, positive ions are formed, they are called cations. So let's have a look in this video. You will get a lot of information about the formation of positive ions and negative ions. So let's start.
Welcome to Moo Math and Science. And what is an ion? A neutral atom will have a certain number of protons and an equal number of electrons. This results in the same number of positive and negative charges, which we can call neutral or a zero net charge. You can produce a charged atom by taking a neutral atom and adding or removing one or more of the electrons, which is called an ion. For example, a sodium atom has 11 protons in its nucleus and 11 electrons. If one of the electrons is lost, there will now be 12 positive charges, but now only 10 negative charges, so it will have a +1 charge. The sodium ion can be written as follows. A positive ion is called a cation and are produced, as I said, when one or more electrons are lost from a neutral atom. Helpful hint, think of a cation as a cat that has paws, for positive. Another example, magnesium will typically lose 2 electrons to form a 2+ cation. Neutral magnesium has 12 positively charged protons and 12 negatively charged electrons. When it loses 2 electrons, it now has 12 protons and 10 electrons, or a 2+ charge. When a neutral atom gains electrons, a negative charge is formed. A negatively charged ion is called an anion. For example, neutral chlorine has 17 positive protons and 17 negatively charged electrons. When it gains an electron, it now has 18 negative charges and obtains a negative charge and can be written as follows. Also, the naming of anions is slightly different than a cation. The suffix "ide" is used, so the chlorine anion would be now called chloride. Another example, neutral oxygen has 8 protons and 8 electrons. Oxygen can gain 2 electrons, which results in a -2 charge, or an oxide ion, which can be written as this. Ions are never formed by changing the number of protons in an atom's nucleus. Isolated atoms do not form ions on their own. Most often, ions are formed when metallic elements combine with non-metallic elements. Metals always form positive ions in rows 1 and 2, and nonmetals form anions by gaining electrons.